Assalamu alaikum and welcome to my channel. Here in this video we are going to be looking at making authentic Moroccan bread. In this clip I'm using table salt. I've used approximately 3 tablespoons. This will make about 3 Moroccan loaves. Obviously use more or less depending on how many you want to make. Here I'm using strong white bread flour. In my opinion, this is the only flour that works for me. It's best not to mix the yeast with the salt, so I always use the salt first, then the flour, and then add the yeast on top because the salt kills the yeast. Here I've used approximately 30 grams of baker's yeast. And approximately a pint or just over a pint of hand hot water. We don't want it so hot that it kills the yeast again. Okay, I'm going to incorporate this into the flour and mix it all together. But I need to add the yeast to the water, so I'm going to do that now. Let it blend in with the water. Okay, so I'm slowly incorporating all of the water and the yeast in with the flour. It's best to add a little bit at a time so that the consistency isn't too soft. It needs to be manageable, and you'll see why soon. Okay, try to get every last bit of the dough into the ball, and you might at this stage want to try and get most of it off of your fingers. Okay, so once you've formed a ball shape, I would allow it to rest for approximately 15 minutes. I usually at this stage put it into a container with a lid so that it doesn't dry out at the top. Meanwhile, wash up. Okay, so I've allowed this to rest now for about 15 minutes. And I'm adding a little bit of water, again warm water, to my hands so that my hands don't stick as I'm kneading. And as you can see, this is the authentic way of making Moroccan bread on your knees. If you can't do it this way, then obviously use a bread mixer. Okay, you probably need about 10 minutes in a mixer. This is a really good workout for your arms. It's actually quite hard work. Okay, and I'll do this normally for about 2 minutes. Okay, meanwhile I am going to put this piece of linen out so that I can allow my bread to rise. I've sprinkled it with some flour, and as you can see, I've let the bread rise for about an hour until it's nice and fluffy and soft, as you can see. Okay, you should begin to see bubbles when it's ready to start to flatten out, which it is here. I'm going to divide this in 3. As I said, I'm making 3 Moroccan loaves. If one's bigger, take a little bit off and add it to the smaller. Try to make them equal size so that they all cook at the same rate. Okay, this is quite tricky, this part, so bear with me. Okay, all about equal size. Okay, you might want to add a little bit of water to your hands because the hands do stick to the dough. But as you can see, I'm using this motion to draw the bread mixture into a dough, and I'm going to place it onto flour so that it stops it from sticking to the linen. Okay, same again for the other two. Okay, you can see here where there are air pockets, which means that it should be just the right texture and consistency. Looking good. Okay, sprinkle a little bit more flour onto the top and roll out almost like a little donut. Okay, and then place them onto the linen and space them apart so that they don't stick to each other. You can see I've used some blankets just to keep the dough warm. If it gets cold, it will not rise. Okay, what I tend to do at this stage is let them rest for about 15 minutes, come back to it, and then pat them down into shape. And Moroccan bread is always formed into a round, flat circle. So try to make it as much of a circle as possible. Easier said than done. Practice makes perfect. Okay, and I do the same for all three. You can see the air bubbles at the side. That means that it's again a good texture and consistency. Allow that, once you've done this, you need to allow the bread to rest for another half an hour and to rise again before putting it into the oven. Gas mark 200, I'm not sure what that, sorry, electric mark 200, gas mark, I'd say 5. So you need quite a high temperature. So after you've let that rest for about half an hour, some people like to pat it down a bit more. It depends how thick you want your bread really. If you want it quite thin, pat it down again, allow it to rise for another 20 minutes. Okay, so they should cook in about 10 minutes. You might want to flip it on the other side and it should be light and hollow to the touch.